So how many tiles did you have in stage 1? So how many were there? 4. All right. And then how many were there in the next one? Okay. And then what about 4, 7? What about the next one? 10. Okay. And what about the next one? And the next one? Okay. And so how many should there be at stage 0? Not 0. There should be 1. Yeah. I know they didn't draw one, but okay. All right. So how many did we start with? How many did we start with? Okay. And I add how many each time? Okay. So this is like your y-intercept. So that's your like initial. And then you add 3 tiles to each stage. And that's going to be your slope. Now, when we write an equation, especially a linear one, because we know that this is linear because we're adding 3 tiles each time. Now, for a linear equation, what is like that equation look like? Remember? Say again. A line. So that's going to be y equals mx plus b, right? Do y'all remember this formula? Where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. So if you didn't know that, I would write this down. So our equation for this one is going to be y equals 3x plus 1. Does everybody see where I got that one from? All right, so when we draw the sketch of this one, you want to draw the y-intercept first, and then you're going to use the slope to get the next dot. So you're going to graph at 1. You cannot see that. I'll show this again. You're going to graph at 1, and then you're going to go up 3 and over 1. Up 3 and over 1. Up 3, 2, 3, and over 1. Okay, and then you're going to connect those big dots. And just like what Lauren said, it's going to be a line. It's a straight line. Okay, so we're going over stuff for your mastery check. Mastery checks are like little quizzes. Normally there's about 3 to 5 questions per mastery check. Just as a like clarifying thing, we have different levels. We've got beginner, we've got developing, we've got proficient, we've got distinguished, and then we've got mastery. Here's how this works. You're going to see on your mastery check down at the bottom these words. If you're a beginner, that's a 60. If you're developing, that's a 75. If you're proficient, that's an 85. If you're distinguished, that's a 95. If you're mastery, you're 100. So like when you see this, these are the grades that you potentially could get. Now, if you don't write anything on the paper, that's a 0. That doesn't do me any good. You have to give me some type of work. Okay, so whenever we do mastery checks, write something down. Don't put IDK. That doesn't do you any good. Show me some type of thought process about this stuff. So, for instance, we've got linear, quadratic, and exponential that we've been talking about, right? Okay, what does a linear look like? What graph does that look like? A line. So it's going to be a straight line. Now it could be going up or it could be going down, right? What is the domain of a linear function? What's the domain? So negative infinity to positive infinity. So from left to right, it goes on forever. Now, what about range? Well, we see these arrows, right? So what does that mean? Negative infinity to positive infinity. Fantastic. So on your mastery check, it's going to give you a picture of a graph, and it's going to say, is this linear, quadratic, or exponential? And then it's going to say, what's the domain and range? One of them is going to be linear. I'm telling you right now. Okay? Good so far. Okay, quadratic, what does it look like? It's like a U. Come in. Oh, shake. Okay, so the way I memorize this is there's a U in quadratic. There's a I in linear, which kind of looks like a straight line. Okay, so quadratic is going to be that U shape. Now, what's the domain for this guy? Domain. So from left to right, it goes on forever, right? So we go from negative infinity to positive infinity. So from left to right, we can plug in any values. Now range, Lauren, you're right. Range, we've got 0 to positive infinity. One thing to note on here is this bracket. You need to have this bracket next to the 0 and then parentheses next to the infinity. Again, there's going to be a question where it has a picture of a parabola, and it's going to say, is this linear, quadratic, or exponential? Questions? Okay, the last one, we've got exponential. This one looks like a swoop. Okay. I don't really have a trick for like memorizing what this shape is. It just goes exponentially fast. Okay. So domain is going to be negative infinity to positive infinity. Notice how all three have the same domain. All three have the same domain. Don't get the domain wrong. Okay. Range is a little different. It's the same thing as quadratic, but there is one change. We got parentheses around that 0 now. The difference is it doesn't touch 0. It gets close, but does not touch. These are the 3 questions. These are the 3 things you got to know. Cool? Okay. For your mastery check, you will get 2 things. You will get a piece of paper that you will write on. This is your paper. This is where you show me work. Then you'll get this little card. Each card is different. Do not write on this card. You must put your version number on your paper, and I will remind you of this multiple times. Another thing, please make sure that you use your first and your last name on your paper. Okay, I'm still getting to know you. I know most of your first names, but last names, I'm still learning. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay, so on your paper, for the increasing and decreasing, you've got this picture right here. You got this right here, right? Oh, okay. You have this on your paper. I want you to label where it's increasing and decreasing. So remember, that's like saying the little Six Flags ride. Are we going down or are we going up first? Down first. Okay, so I'm gonna label it. And now you're telling me where that happened. So on your paper, where does it start? We start over here on the left, right? What do we call that? Okay, good. And then where does it stop decreasing on your paper? Not a 0, look at your paper. Not the Y values, look at the X. It stops at 1, right? Did everybody see that? On your paper, it has this like graph that looks like this, right? Okay. It stops at 1 because we're looking at the X, and it started at negative infinity. So we went from negative infinity to 1. That's where we decreased. Now, what about increasing? Well, it started increasing on the other side, right? So where did it start? And where did it stop? Okay, good. Okay, on the next one, this one's a little weird. So we have a graph that looks like this, right? Okay, is this increasing or decreasing first? Increasing. Okay, and where did it start? Negative infinity. And it went until where? About 1, right? It might be like 0.8, but we're going to just say 1. Now what happened? What's the next thing? It decreased, right? Well, where did it start decreasing? It started at -1 and went into where? Look at the x values. So it went from -1 to 1, right? So it went from -1 to 1. And then what did it do? It increased again. So sometimes you might have more than one increasing interval. Okay? When we do that, how we write it is we say from -infinity to -1, and then we put this u in between the next parentheses. Then we say from 1 to positive infinity. This notation right here is just a fancy way of saying and. Okay. Can you try that third one? So it increased first. Where did it increase from? -infinity to where? -2. Then what happened here? It stayed the same. We call that constant. Okay, so we're going to say constant. And where did that happen from? -2 to 2. Good. Then what happened? It increased. So from 2 to positive infinity, right? Okay, when they ask about like increasing and decreasing, it's kind of like if you're like gossiping to your friend. You're like, and then what happened? And then what happened? And you're telling like the story, and there's the highs and lows. Okay, that's kind of how you want to think about it. All right, cool. Okay, flip over to the back. I want you to do, let's do all the evens. Let's do 2, 4, 6, 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay. So on number 2, you should have gotten increasing from -infinity to positive infinity. Number 4, you should have gotten increasing from -infinity to 2, and then decreasing from 2 to positive infinity. Number 6, you should have gotten decreasing is -infinity to -3 and 2 to positive infinity, and then increasing from -3 to 2. Question about 2, 4, and 6 so far. Okay, number 8 is increasing from -infinity to -3 and 2 to positive infinity, and then decreasing from -3 to 2. Again, this is like telling your friends some gossip. It's like, and then this happened, but then he did something wrong. And then this happened, and you know what I'm saying? Like that kind of conversation. Have y'all ever ridden an e-scooter? No. They have them like in Atlanta. They used to call them like birds or whatever. And then they had like, I don't know, people were leaving them all over the place. Like in Athens, so I went to UGA. What happened was like people would leave them like in the trees. Like they would just like throw them in the trees. And so they had to stop using them. So they're kind of cool. It's kind of like an Uber, but for the city. So today we're going to use function notation. That's what we talked about on Thursday. Linear functions and unit rates to determine if Jisoo has enough money to have lunch or ride a scooter from Ponce City Market to Centennial Olympic Park. Have y'all ever been to Ponce City Market? Yeah, I feel like everybody has. I feel like it's not cool anymore because everybody's on it. Okay, so Jisoo is visiting Atlanta and will be renting an e-scooter to get around. E-scooter company uses an app to accept payments for renting the scooter. In the app, it states that the function C of t gives the cost of renting the e-scooter in dollars for t minutes. So based on the app's previous data storage, Jisoo knows that C of 2 is 1.5 and C of 5 is 2.25. Okay, cool. All right, so on your paper, that should say like part 1 up at the top. In the app, it states that the function C of t gives the cost of renting the e-scooter in dollars for t minutes. Based on the app's previous data, we already went over that. So what does C of 2 equal 1.5 tell us about renting an e-scooter? What about C of 5 equal 2.25? I want you to take a moment. I want you to write out your thoughts on your paper, and let's discuss. Take a second. All right, so tell me what this means. What does C of 2 equal 1.5 mean? say it again. Okay, so close, very close. So at 2 minutes, it costs 1.5, so $1.50. So for 2 minutes, for him to go vroom vroom down the road, it costs him $1.50. How far can you get in 2 minutes? 24. I mean, it depends on how fast you're going, right? Yeah. What about C of 5 equal 2.25? Okay, so at 5 minutes, it costs $2.25, right? All right, cool. Looking at the next part, it says use function notation to represent each statement. So it costs $1 to unlock the e-scooter. Costs $1 to unlock the e-scooter. So what we're doing is the reverse. They're giving you the description, and now you got to write this little notation. Okay. So how do we write the function notation for that one? So looking at your paper, it said it costs $1 to unlock the e-scooter. What's the function notation going to look like for that one? Have you traveled anywhere once you unlock the e-scooter? You haven't gotten on the scooter at all, right? So it's going to be C of 0 equals what? 1. Everybody see where I got that from? I'm just unlocking the e-scooter. I have not gone anywhere. I haven't used any minutes. It's going to cost me $1 to get in there. Yeah. Go ahead and do part B. It costs $3.50 to ride the e-scooter for 10 minutes. Write that in function notation. What is that going to look like? C of what? C of 10 equals $3.50, right? Okay, so now that we've kind of gotten a foundation for that, which by the way, that's exactly what your mastery check is going to look like tomorrow. Just a heads up, okay? But now that we kind of have that foundation, I want you to continue with the rest of these parts. And once you finish, I want you to go ahead and move on to part 3. Now you can work with somebody else if you want to. You can do it by yourself, that's fine. But I'm gonna give you about 20 minutes and I want you to graph it, write the function, and then answer the questions up on the back. Okay, yes, ma'am. So mastery checks are pretty frequent. It's kind of like every 3-ish days. Well, every day we're probably gonna learn something new. Yeah. It's again pretty quick. We start off slow, but once we get into unit 2, it's like every day we're doing something different. And that's just because we're on that block schedule. I think one unit has maybe 5 mastery checks max, but the rest of them are about 3 mastery checks per unit. So, yep. All right, so take about 20. What was the equation that you came up with for C of T? What did you come up with? Okay, better yet. What is the equation for a linear function? Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so then we've got the y-intercept and we got the slope, right? Okay, so how much are we going to start with if we go in and we unlock the e-scooter? $1. That's going to be our y-intercept, right? Now, how much does it cost for each minute? 0.25, right? And here's how that happens. At 0 minutes, you tell me that it's $1. At 2 minutes, you told me it was $1.50. So how much would it be at 1 minute? What's halfway between 1 and 150? Go ahead. 125. So each minute we're adding 25 cents. We're adding a quarter, right? With me? Okay, I'm getting a little blank stares. Okay. So when we finally write out this equation, you're going to say C of t equals 0.25 t plus 1. So that's what your equation should look like. Now, you graph this. I just want to kind of show you what that graph looks like. And do we see how it's got that straight line? Boom. Okay, tomorrow on your mastery check, it's going to ask you to describe it in terms of input and output. Input and output. Input is what the X value is that you're plugging in, and output is what is produced at the end. So notice how they said 2 is the input here, and 1.5 is the output. That's on your mastery check. Cool? Easy enough? Okay. And we've already talked about this, but just in case, the rate of change or the slope is 0.25, and 1 was our initial value, or also known as the y-intercept. Okay? Remember how we talked about last week interpreting what it means? If I said C of t, right? I would ask you for the total cost of renting the e-scooter. That's what you would write out. If I said, hey, interpret what C of t means, the total cost of renting the e-scooter at t seconds or t minutes. Okay, did you already finish part 3? No, we need a couple more minutes on that. Okay, a couple more minutes to work on that. If you have finished that, I want to remind you that you have a test on Friday. Okay, I gave you the review guide. We're going to work on it throughout the week. Tomorrow we're going to do some of it. Every time that you take a test, though, you must turn in your review guide in order to take the test. So if you show up on the day of the test and you don't have your review guide done, you're going to sit there and complete your review guide, and whatever time is remaining after that, that's how much time you have to take your test. Okay, so come prepared to take your test. Okay, please don't think, oh, I'll get extra time to study that. No, you'll just kill into your time to take the test. Okay, so we must complete the review guide. So if you finished with part 3 already, go ahead and do your review guide. If you haven't finished that, go ahead